For those who don't know who Father Łukasz is, it's Father Łukasz Miśko, if I said it correctly. And
correct, yes.
The most Americanized Polish priest I know. So Father is the director of the Dominican Liturgical Center in Krakow, Poland, which I'm very, very fond of. And I'm getting him on today to talk about the Liturgical Center, what they're doing. It's a really inspirational place that I think is quite unique in the world. And so I really wanted to get, I guess, the first-hand information for people to know and maybe get inspired by what's going on. So I guess the first question I want to ask you, which I feel like I'll learn something as well, is the history of the Liturgical Center and like what was its purpose, when did it start, and then I guess how it's continuing now. Could you give a lowdown?
Yes, absolutely. Well, so the center itself may be unique. Thank you for all your kind words, Grace. But the center is really a product or a fruit of a movement. And I think the movement is even more unique. Typically, movements are more interesting than institutions. Movements are about this grassroots desire to do something, to make a difference, to find some new direction, and that's really how it started. So I'm actually sitting right now in a little Dominican forest cottage near the city of Poznań in the northwest of Poland. And it's important because the city of Poznań, which is a university city in Poland, is where some parts of the movements were born, so to speak. So we are back in the 1970s. This is right after the council, and Poland, as you may know, is a country that is governed by the Communist Party, the People's Republic of Poland. You know, it's kind of a free country, but not really, right? And the church is having some difficulties in operating freely, especially, well, the church has no system of Catholic schools or Catholic universities. There is only one university that is run by the Catholic Church in this 40 million country that is basically entirely Catholic, right? So you can imagine it takes more of that local sort of, not really institutional, but just, you know, like people's movement, you know, to also implement the Second Vatican Council, and especially the changes that will affect the liturgy, right? So we didn't have much of institutions. They were sort of, you know, suppressed by the communist government. And of course, the Polish Bishops' Conference was slowly translating all the liturgical books, but in many ways it was the people on the local level that had to find their own way. So they tried, you know, they tried with the vernacular, they tried with the new music. Unfortunately, we made some common mistakes that you probably know from other countries, right?
Yes.
So yeah, we had guitar masses, we had jazz masses, we had rock masses, all the big bands playing in our churches, you know, with drum sets and all that stuff. Yes, we did that as well.
We did it all.
Yeah, but what's interesting is that the Dominicans in some locations, like in the city of Poznań that I just mentioned to you, well, the Dominican friars, they ran at the time, and they still do run university chaplaincies. That's our charism in this country, which is not perhaps obvious in other countries or places, that the Dominicans are so deeply involved in university chaplaincy and the outreach to young people. Well, that's what we do here in Poland, and that was a very interesting environment in the 1970s, because those people, of course, you know, they wanted the change, right? They would get involved in those bands, and, you know, that was the joy of that liturgical change. But as I talk to people who are now in their 60s or 70s, they remember being young kids back then. They often say, you know what, we felt like that was kind of wrong. It's like we felt like that was the wrong direction. You know, it was sort of like a temporary solution, but it was not permanent. It didn't feel like it should stay that way. So pretty early on in the 70s, the Dominicans and college students that they worked with, started looking for something more, we would say, organic, in line with the church's tradition, but open to the new kind of development. So, yes, they looked at Polish Renaissance motets, for instance, or Gregorian chant, and they would draw from that some inspirations to write new music that would sound sort of Renaissance-y, kind of, high churchy and transcendent, and yet kind of, easy to follow, because the Vatican II push for congregational participation, for this active participation, was something that really spoke to people. So they wanted to sing along, right? They didn't just want to have professional choirs to sing as if performing, right, as a concert sort of setting. No, they wanted to be able to participate, but it didn't mean for them, as they recall, to make music sort of flat or banal or just kind of cheap, right? So that's, I think, one inspiration, that university chaplaincy. There was this charismatic Dominican priest, Father Jan Góra was his name. He was a campus minister, university chaplain here in Poznań. Well, I say here because, as I mentioned, I'm just like 20 kilometers from the city of Poznań, sitting in the woods, and catching up on some projects of mine. So anyway,
it's like, you need no distraction, and you need to...
But it was not only Poznań; it was also Kraków, which is the ancient capital of Poland, and a big university community. The Dominicans there have their seminary, or as we call it, a house of studies, which is a beautiful medieval priory, which you, Grace, have visited more than once. Yes, I know. So that's where the Dominican seminarians would study to become priests. And this experience of trying to implement Vatican II in a sense of continuity, in the spirit of continuity, well, that was something that young Dominican brothers would bring with them into the studentate, so the period of formation. And what's interesting, well, again, in other places, Dominican students may have houses of studies in different countries or different Dominican provinces, but those houses may not always be a pastoral kind of house, right? They may be sort of, removed from ministry, so that the student brothers have this quiet time, to study theology and philosophy and pastoral studies. Well, that's not the case of Kraków. Well, Kraków is, you know that, right? It's a wild place. It's a hub of all sorts of ministries. So university chaplaincy, high school ministry, families, charismatic renewal movements, you name it. It all happens under one roof with the Dominican student brothers. So that was that second place. After the city of Poznań, it was Kraków in the 80s. We had at the time over 100 young Dominicans in formation. That was a big boom following John Paul II's election. So that was the kind of JP2 effect in Poland. And those student brothers actually started looking at ways of incorporating that music in a kind of more orderly way into the liturgy. Because initially it was kind of like, you would have a night of prayer, like a vigil before some, solemnities, and that new music that, people would write, it would be performed at those kind of extra events, not during the liturgy often, right? But the student brothers wanted to create something like a gradual, something like a repertoire that would be more kind of, planned, or like more incorporated into Mass. So there was this one Easter vigil, the whole Easter Triduum actually, in Kraków, when they had a few new compositions, and they, meaning the student brothers, went to their Dominican superior, the guy we call the student master. He's the formator of the Dominicans. So at the time, there was this really interesting fellow who was the person in charge of all those 100+ young Dominicans. And they said to him, "Father, we have some new pieces we would like to perform at Easter Vigil. Is that okay?" And he said, "Well, you know what? I believe in the unity of style." So it's important to make it unified, not kind of haphazardly, one piece of polyphony and then something Gregorian and then something, kind of, praise and worship. It's unity that matters. That's what he said. And apparently that was the beginning of the famous Easter vigil in Krakow, because they basically sat down and wrote all the missing pieces, so that basically they had everything. The new setting for the exultet, for each responsorial psalm of the Easter vigil, for all the songs and psalms, and that was an amazing experience that people loved. So this is late 1980s, right? Over 40 years ago. And now we have this whole movement in Poland that basically promotes that music, records, keeps writing in that same style, which, by the way, I wonder how you would describe, Grace. I mean, you've seen it, you've heard it.
Uh,
So what's our style?
it's not my interview file. No, it is. I think if I could summarize what made it different from, say, English hymnody, which I'd worked with a lot, and these things, was that there's a sense of reverence in the music that is quite unique. And there's only maybe one or two other composers composing in a Catholic context that are doing that around the world, I'd say. There's only one I could think of. And it encapsulates a little bit of the Eastern music. A lot of the harmony is, set in the minor key. It sort of draws you into yourself with reverence. That's how I can explain it.
Thank you.
Um,
I like it.
yeah.
That's a good explanation. But I would say that there's joy in it. So not just
Sorry.
minor keys.
Yeah, the ones I love.
But
Yeah.
but it's also subdued. I think the difference is that when we go sort of into the joyful mode, right? As for instance, the Eastertide chants, they're very upbeat, but not in a silly way, not in a kind of cheap joy way, but it's
Yeah.
deep sense of gratitude for all those gifts. And I think the text, sure, I mean, the hymnody that people compose in English or French or German, it's beautiful in many ways. And the texts are quite amazing, the poetry that is used in other countries. So I'm not saying that the Polish style is better, but I think what makes it different is that we draw from the church fathers a lot. That's something we really want to do. And this is also a Vatican II idea, to go back to those early centuries of the church and see if that poetry, the images, the different, poetic sort of, directions, theological directions may still inspire us. So yeah, that's what we do as well.
Yes, and always seeing where the text is always from like a beautiful biblical context. And even I don't know the Polish, but the translation into English is always encapsulates the right imagery. We're not running away. I think sometimes in the 70s and 80s we needed to create new ideas to make it appealing for some reason, but that's not necessary. Like, we have the symbology, the theology, and we can continue using it with new compositions. And I think the aspect that really drew me to this Dominican music was that you covered all the requests for good sacred music from the motu proprio of was it 1905, Tre Sollecitudini, and even Vatican II, and it's
That's quite
continue.
a compliment. Thank you.
Yeah, but it's modern while still doing what was asked of the composers, essentially, by our previous popes. And so I think that's what drew me, because it does sound different and new and fresh, but it's still always drawing us to, God, or drawing us into ourselves rather than a party or these sort of things.
But
I feel.
speaking about this sort of attraction, I think it's not simply contemplative music to listen to by yourself. It has a very strong community sort of component to it. So people love singing it, even if they're not professional singers. That's something about the movement that my center, the Dominican Liturgical Center of Krakow, is trying to promote and just maintain, because it's growing. It has a life of itself, right? But we as a center try to just add some fuel to the fire, but it's burning brightly. But what I'm talking about is the community component, right? People love doing this music even if they barely read the notes, or sometimes they can't sight read, but they say, well, it's so simple, and the effect of that communal four-part harmony is so powerful. It gives that sense of belonging and creating something, and it doesn't really take much. I mean, sure, you have to rehearse. You can't just like show up and be in the choir, but it doesn't take as much work as the high polyphony, or very complex polyphony. So I think that's, from the pastoral point of view, really important.
Yeah, well, you and I have experience in London. We do it in one day. We teach people this beautiful music in one day, and that's just really unique. It was a real experience for me as the conductor and the director of the workshops to see how fast people could learn the music and have it relatively ready by the evening. So it was very inspiring, very good.
Yeah.
So I guess, what events are being held at the liturgical center, I could say, or at the priory, say this year? What things are being covered? And then there's a very important one that I think we both love very much that we want to talk about.
Well, let me start with the minor ones, although, I mean, they're not insignificant. They're minor compared to the big one. So I'm going to leave the big one for the very end. The thing is about the center that really, it's just an office, and the people who create the content, but really we operate in different venues, right? So we travel a lot. Myself, my fellow Dominicans, like Father Wojciech Sznyk, who is a wonderful singer, and he teaches Gregorian chant, he teaches polyphony and traditional Polish chant as well, kind of, traditional Catholic folk music. So we have him, we have Father David Kusz, who is a very renowned composer, and he writes both kind of typical simple four-part Dominican stuff from Poland, but also as a composer, he teaches composition at the JP2 University here in Krakow. So he also writes very high polyphony, beautiful stuff. So he travels a lot. We do events like workshops, or we preach retreats, or like days of formation. We come to parishes and we try to help pastors and music directors to kind of galvanize their communities and to bring some new enthusiasm, and perhaps to show the way how to live that spirit of liturgy through music. So we do a lot of teaching around the country, and not only around the country. As you mentioned, Grace, once a year we go to London, England, and we run this beautiful rosary, it's Eucharistic rosary procession that is basically a day of music workshop, and at the end of that day we help the congregation pray with the music that we've learned during this beautiful procession at the Rosary Shrine in London. Well, so that's just a few examples of what we do. We run a website, we publish the music, Dominican hymnals. Actually, the English translations that we mentioned, they exist. It's not much, I would say, compared to the 2 volumes of the Dominican hymnal that we've published in Poland so far. Our translated pieces would be perhaps like 30 or so. So it's just like a little sample of, what it tastes like, this Polish Dominican music in English, right? And it's available on our website for free. So if you guys would like to sing that with your congregation, go for it. We are happy. Yes, it's free stuff. Just give it away. But then the big one, right? The big event. It's our annual Sacred Music Conference, well, I say conference, but it's not really a conference. It's not an academic event, right? We call it actually a workshop. The name is somewhat misleading because it's called Extraordinary Music Workshop, which is the translation from the Polish name Warsztaty Muzyki Niezwykłej. And in English, sometimes the word extraordinary in the context of the liturgy may sort of make people think that it's associated with the extraordinary form of the Mass, right? Which is not. I mean, extraordinary meaning like just
Amazing.
it's really great, like really amazing, right? Like, but also not ordinary. Like, it's not the music you sing on a daily basis, because we bring together Byzantine sources and the Western Latin sources. There's some high polyphony and some Gregorian chant, but not too much. There is also this contemporary Polish polyphony, which is singable but reverent, accessible to any congregation, really. So we create this week-long event. We also invite some kind of really interesting people to show just kind of, different contexts for music. For instance, we would invite some Corsican singers to show how polyphony may still be alive and well, like on the island of Corsica. We bring some, other sort of experts on different types of music, and it all serves one purpose: to give us, I don't know, this boost, to just love singing even more, to rediscover the power of that communal singing, of music making. But then it's not just for the sake of workshop, right? It's not just for the sake of learning new stuff. It all becomes actually part of this liturgical experience. I don't know if you, Grace, had that sense of like how our music making actually serves a greater purpose. But every day of the workshop is basically structured after the liturgy. Liturgy of the Hours. We start with lauds, beautifully chanted in our Dominican Basilica. We have daily Mass. We have beautiful Vespers and different events at night, kind of devotions, but we create them together. So that's the sense of like, outside of the liturgy, we can actually use music and beautiful symbols and signs and gestures and spaces and vestments to create something that is new, but deeply rooted in that old tradition of the church. So that's what it is. A whole week of experience in the beautiful Gothic priory of the Dominicans in Krakow.
Yeah. And so what are the dates for people if they are interested in attending?
So you're all invited. I don't know if I stress that enough, but the program is in English, so you can actually easily participate. We have 350 or so Poles who attend the programs in Polish, but at the same time, in adjacent rooms, there is this English international community. So English is really the language that we use to communicate, but we come from different backgrounds, different countries, and different language groups. And the dates, so now hopefully you are, more excited because it's in English, so you can easily participate, even though it's in Poland. And the dates for the 2024 edition would be because registration is open. It's July 8th through 14th. So yeah, hopefully we'll see you guys in Krakow.
Yeah, and I can say it's an amazing experience, and it's not, as you said, there is music, of course, and you learn, but also the people you meet. I want to stress that is that there is a sense of you create this international kind of family while you're bonding with music and prayer, and so it's a real highlight of people's years. I think now, like people are returning and enjoying it. So that's, yes, I can stress that. It's really incredible. And also, could you please explain who are the faculty this year for people who are interested?
Yes. So this is going to be the third year of us doing this international project. And the faculty slightly changes. So, last year we had you, Grace, with us as one of the faculty. well, 2 years ago you participated, so it was really awesome. And this year we have, well, one Dominican priest who is perhaps, I don't know, the mostly uh, the most internationally renowned Dominican musician, I would say, and it's not Father David Kush. It's Father Robert Melhart. He is a Dominican priest, originally from Bavaria, Germany, but last year, after years of teaching music in Vienna and in Munich, he was appointed the president of the Pontifical Institute for Sacred Music in Rome. So that is pretty up there. And so he runs this pontifical institution in Rome, but he's been coming for the last couple of years teaching Gregorian chant, but also polyphony. Father Robert is a wonderful teacher, great energy, and a wonderful, wonderful man. Then we'll have Elena Bird Zolnik. She is an American teacher, teaches at St. Paul's University in St. Paul, Minnesota. And Elena was a participant last year. She's just getting her DMA, her doctorate in musical arts, this spring. So as a freshly coined doctor of music, she will be also leading some classes. This summer, we'll have Father David Kush, our Dominican composer, who will share a bit on his musical experience. We'll have the Byzantine cantor who's been with us for years. Andriy Shkrabyuk is his name. He's a wonderful singer from the city of Lviv in Ukraine. So he will teach us some Byzantine or Eastern Catholic music. And then we'll have daily talks on spirituality of music, of spirituality of liturgy by Father Innocent Smith. He's a Dominican priest from St. Joseph's province in the United States, and he is an expert on liturgical medieval books, but he also loves singing, and I'm sure he will lead us through both the liturgical sources, the medieval beautiful books, but also how today we can feel that I don't know, the greatness of our Catholic tradition. I don't know really what he's going to talk about. He's just a great guy, so I'm just making this up, right?
I'm sure it'll be amazing. The talks have always been really good. Each year and each day have been really good. So, no, the faculty lineup sounds amazing. I know people like personally, and they're really wonderful people to work with, sing with, and just spend time with. So it's a really enjoyable time to even just to get to know these people. So we'll wrap it up there, Father. I know you're really busy, tucked away in the cottage. You've got things to do. But I would like to just highlight that this workshop is in July. All the details are on the website, or you can go to the Dominican Liturgical Center website and it's there as well. Please DM either of us if you have questions. And yeah, we hope that you can attend, or please invite people that may know or may appreciate this experience. So thank you, Father, for being on.
Great. Thank you so much for having me.
I look forward to seeing you. I think in October is now it's a while away.
God bless. Happy Eastertide to all of you.
All right. Thank you, Father. God bless.